Hi, everyone. My name is Lance Gardner. I'm a producer here at KQED. I'm a KQED Live events producer, and tonight I'm so pleased to bring you Bay Area cheese culture. This is a live taping of Forum, and you here tonight get the special edition of a cheese tasting after the event. So you were smart to show up and not wait for this to air on the radio. I want to, before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the KQED headquarters is on the unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples here in what we now call San Francisco. And I'd like you to acknowledge that as well and keep that in mind as we are guests here in this place. Tonight, we have a wonderful slate of cheese experts with us, both dairy and vegan, to talk about what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. And none of this would be possible without our season sponsors. KQED Live is sponsored by Asian Art Museum, Comcast Business, Berkeley Rep, and the Oakland International Airport. We thank them for their support. They make everything that we do possible. So, before I bring out our hosts and our guest, I would like to announce the winners of the quiz. If you were smart enough to get in on this quiz action, you stand a chance of winning some swag. I see a lot of shaking heads out here, so that might be unfortunate. This quiz was also open to people who are watching in our live stream, so you are only eligible to win if you are here in the room. And according to our tally, our winners are Al N. and Nick L. We have two winners. Are those people here in the house? Oh, we see one winner right there. Here comes a KQED backpack for you. Thank you for playing, and for you too. Thank you so much for playing. And we thank our sponsors for their for making these kind of things possible. So, I'm sorry? The quiz was on a QR code in the pre-show slide loop. Yeah, we hide them. I know. Next time. You know what that means, folks? It means that you have to come back. We would love to see you back. We produce a diverse slate of live events here on this stage and upstairs on our beautiful terrace rooftop and in our boardroom. We turned it into a lounge. In fact, we have a Bay Curious trivia night coming up. It's sold out, so we added another night. If you missed out on signing up for that, check that out and get registered. We'll have a bar. We'll have fun games. Bring your friends, bring your enemies, and beat them. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome the host of this evening's event, Forum co-host Alexis Madrigal.
Gosh, there's always this Madonna effect to having these things on. Also, I would normally tell you never click on the QR code, but obviously here, every time you got to make sure you get on the QR code. Welcome to Forum Live. I'm Alexis Madrigal. I mean, here at KQED, we love to cover food as culture, Bay Area culture. We love to cover it as Bay Area landscape, but it's also food. It's delicious. And I don't want to detract from the glory of that, especially since, unlike when we're doing the show on the radio, after this, we're all going to go eat this cheese and eat bread also from our bread sponsor after the show. So I want to just take us off into this journey into one of the most magical cheesescapes on Earth, which is Northern California. Joining us tonight for this conversation, we have an amazing panel of different kinds of cheesemakers and cheese lovers. And first, we have a pioneer of vegan cheese who really has redefined what vegan cheese can be. She's the founder of Miyoko's Creamery, Miyoko Schinner. We also have Vivien Straus. She's the founder and managing partner of the California Cheese Trail. Welcome, Vivien. Also, just want to note, she's from the family. the Straus family, but she's not involved in the operation. So don't ask her about European style versus not European style Straus yogurt. That's not what she does. And finally, we have Jenna Coughlin, the head cheesemaker at Tomales Farmstead Creamery. Welcome, Jenna. I also love that in a live taping, people just start clapping. They're just like, no, the applause sign. It's like basically there. First question. I thought I knew the answer to this question until I really started to think about it. And that is, what is cheese? Vivien, let's start with you. What makes cheese cheese?
Cheese is basically milk that is, it is controlled fermenting of milk. And cheese has 4 ingredients: milk, cultures, enzymes, and salt.
And that's it?
That's it. That's
and
it.
all the types of cheese that we call cheese.
They just do different things, different amounts of cultures, different combinations, different heating of the milk, different types of milk. So cheddars might all have similar cultures, but there's thousands of different cultures. So they can all be different, and some people just create their own cheese.
Yeah. Jenna, you're the head cheesemaker, which means you're in charge of like this process. So for you, how do you think about what it is to turn milk into cheese?
It's this really unique combination of food, science, art, magic, and a really unique conversion of one thing to another. And we're all just kind of trying to control that process and get the best thing we can out of it.
I mean, when we were talking backstage, one of the things that really struck me was this idea that the milk doesn't want to become cheese. Like that there's actually, it's difficult to get it to turn into cheese. What did you mean by that?
As it comes out of an animal or as you create it from a nut milk, milk is going to have a certain chemistry to it. And a lot of what we do in cheese making is manipulating that chemistry to get it to turn from milk into curd. And curds get processed in whatever way, and that is cheese.
Got it. Yeah. Miyoko, you make vegan cheese. So for you, do you see vegan cheese as just the same thing as the other cheeses, or do you see it as something fundamentally distinct and separate?
Well, you know, Alex, it could be construed differently by different vegan cheesemakers, but we actually at Miyoko's make cheese in a very similar way to these lovely ladies right here. We start out with a plant milk, and it could be from nuts or legumes or seeds, and then we inoculate it with dairy cultures, enzymes to coagulate the proteins or the starches sometimes, and then we turn it into cheese, following many of the same methods as traditional cheese making.
And when we talk about vegan cheese, like maybe I've had, that's not Miyoko's Creamery vegan cheese. What would that be? Like, what is it?
Okay. Yeah, so the vast...
Not to ask you to talk trash about the other vegan cheesemakers, but to ask you to talk trash.
Well, you know, I think that we're sort of in that evolutionary period trying to figure out, you know, how do you make cheese from plants? And there's many different approaches. The most common is just combining oil and starch and then adding a bottle of natural flavors. I would say it's akin to making American cheese. It's a sort of a processed form. So that's pretty much what you find in the marketplace, but there are up-and-coming young vegan cheesemakers that are embracing the art and history of traditional cheesemaking and making beautiful cheeses that have bloomy rinds and blue veins and all sorts of things.
Jenna, what's something you wish people understood better about cheese who aren't involved in sort of the cheesemaking world?
The thing I really try to explain to people, like when they come visit our farm on farm tours, is that milk changes throughout the season because animals eat different things, the pastures change, just all kinds of seasonal differentiation happens. So you will make a different cheese from January to July. And that is sort of the interesting and exciting aspect, is figuring out how to make the best cheese with the milk that you have at that time and the way it changes.
That is, because I don't think of cheese as being like a seasonal food. Like I don't, like asparagus, strawberries, like I understand tomatoes, like I understand those have these seasons. When you say the milk is different, you mean like the fat content? It's like, what's different about the milk during these?
The the feed that animals are having at any given time is going to affect what gets processed into their milk. So at certain times of year, the fat ratio is going to be higher. You get more color and plant cyanins, essentially, that change the color of the cheese. So if they're eating a lot of grass, you're going to get a more yellow cheese. Whereas at other times of year, if they're eating more hay, then you have a more white cheese.
So if I'm used to eating a cheddar that's always the same color, that means they dye it probably, right?
Yeah, they add something called annatto, which is a natural dye. I think that was originated from the desire to have spring-type cheese all year round.
That's so interesting. Miyoko, how about you? What do you wish people knew about cheese generally or vegan cheese?
Well, it's interesting because dairy cheese has been around for thousands of years, and the advent into plant milk cheeses is relatively new. It really only just started maybe a decade or so ago. So we're just learning about how plant milks operate. They don't behave the same way as dairy cheese. You can't just add rennet and expect the proteins to coagulate. And not all of them do coagulate. Not all the plant milks coagulate. So we're really just discovering how do these plant proteins behave when they're inoculated with various microorganisms like bacteria that bring their pH down, or they have different amounts of sugar depending on the plant, different amounts of protein, and we're just discovering the most protein and fat-rich seeds and nuts that behave more similarly to dairy, cow dairy or sheep dairy than other things.
I just want to make sure people, and by people I mean myself, understand what these plant milks are. Like, sort of when I think of what olive oil is, for example, it's turned out to be, it's kind of more like olive juice.
Yeah.
So what is a plant-based milk in this way?
Okay, for us, it would be something like cashew milk. We have some new cheeses that are made out of watermelon seed milk. So, which is a very, very
Is that a thing? That doesn't sound like
it's
a thing.
It's a thing. We kind of discovered it. And it's really interesting. It curdles. So we have a cottage cheese that's being made out of that will launch next year. We have a mozzarella that's made out of watermelon seed milk. It's very high in protein. Calorie for calorie, it's actually higher in protein than cow's milk. In protein. So it's quite interesting. Some produce really funky flavors. Other produce just really lovely, sort of unctuous notes. So it really depends. Every single plant milk has different characteristics, and they react differently depending on the lactic acid bacteria that you use. I mean, we played around with so many types of bacteria, and it's interesting. When I first started the company in 2014, there were no vegan bacteria available at all. And now, all of the culture companies are making all sorts of cultures that are grown in dextrose rather than in lactose, because there's so many plant milk creameries that are coming up.
Vivien, you get the final word on this. What's something that you wish people understood about cheese that is not commonly understood?
I want to say that milk does not come from a bowl.
I hope that is commonly understood, to be honest.
It's
It's really not.
Unfortunately, it's not. So I want to say you have to be a mother to give milk. I want to say actually that there's so many incredible cheesemakers and farms that you can visit in California, and that's what I want people to get out, to find out that there are small farms struggling in America, and in California, the only small farms left are really in the Bay Area: Sonoma, Napa, Marin, and the Humboldt area. So get out on a farm. That's what I really want to say. Go visit the cheesemakers.
Well, and I feel like this leads pretty directly into the California Cheese Trail, right? Which, tell us what that actually is and why you started it. Oh, there we go. We have a portion of the map.
Yes. So
The important portion of the map, I would say.
The very important portion. I grew up in a dairy, and I saw how farms are struggling, and so I was looking for a way to help small farms, and it was suggested to me to make a cheese map, and then I realized that the cheesemakers had no money and no marketing and didn't really know how to get the word out about their cheeses, and most of the cheesemakers are really tiny, and so that was just something that I thought I could do, and the map really has gotten people out there, and they're discovering new cheeses. So.
Yeah. I mean, what kinds of stories do exist in these different places, right? I mean, I think I understand the rough sense of like what a family farm is, I think, but maybe not. Like what's the story, for example, of the farm that we're looking at here?
That's the Asagina Dairy, and they are outside Petaluma. And Joe Pacheco, who's the dad, the guy in the red shirt, he's a cheesemaker. I mean, he's a dairy farmer from way back, and then they got some goats. They started making cheese right there on the farm, and that's the whole family. Everybody's involved, and you can go on that farm and get a tasting and see the creamery and see the animals, and they'll tell you exactly what happens. And the great thing is when you go to a farm, they will tell you about their struggles, which for me are very interesting to find out what's difficult about being a farmer and what's the great thing about being a farmer. And then you get to be outside, and so that's what I love.
Well, what is difficult about being a small farmer? I mean, if you're someone who's having a lot of interactions with them, what's the most common story you hear about why it's hard to be a small farmer?
Well, basically, farmers are never paid what it costs to produce the milk, and the price is not based on their cost of production. So they need to find another way to make a living, so that's why a lot of them have started making cheese, because it is a value-added product. But they will tell you, I know they all have these unique stories. You have to go to each one of them. Some of them are like, there's one that's a stockbroker that left New York and said, I'm going to figure out how to make farms sustainable, and I'm going to show the world I can do it. And making cheese, and they have a whole bunch of different animals, and some of them are 5 generations of dairy farmers who are trying to find a new way with a new generation to do something different.
Did you start out thinking like, I'm going to do all of California, or did you want to do, Marin, say, or something like that?
I started out in Marin and Sonoma because that's the biggest bulk of the small cheesemakers in California. And then immediately, after 2 months of doing the first map, one of the cheesemakers came up to me and said, oh my gosh, my sales just went up 25%. This map is bringing people. And then other cheesemakers started throughout California, said, can you please expand it? And so I did, and so now it's all of California.
Yeah. Can we continue on this little tour of California? How about the Pennyroyal Farm?
Pennyroyal is in Boonville, so it's in wine country, and it's actually 2 women. One is from a winery family, and the other one wanted to work with the animals, so they have sheep and goats, and they make cheese right there on site, and you can drink wine and eat cheese and take a tour of their animals and see the farm and see what they do there.
Is it right outside, like the little town?
It's just right outside as you come into Boonville. It's right there.
That's one of the best little towns in. How has the pandemic? I mean, the pandemic did such damage to so many small businesses. I wouldn't necessarily think that it would have a huge effect on these creameries, but did it?
It did. It had a huge effect because a lot of the creameries sell their cheese to restaurants, and all the restaurants closed. So they all had a very hard time. And but somehow, I don't know, they've made it through. I could talk to Jenna.
Yeah, Jenna, do you want to pop in on that one? Like, how did you all respond to the difficulties of the pandemic?
I actually started my cheese career during the pandemic, so I just sort of saw what was happening in terms of, like you mentioned, restaurant accounts dropping off and things like that. But a lot of them pivoted to a sort of at-home kit situation. So you were able to get our cheeses, for example, through a lot of our partner restaurants. So they were able to keep buying, we were able to keep selling, and people were able to keep eating.
Yeah, I've been so amazed by the ingenuity of the entire food system in coming up with new ways of surviving during this time. Jenna, I also want to talk about just give us the sort of basics on Tomales Farmstead Creamery. Like you started it during this time, but where is it? What kind of cheese do you make? Just give us kind of the elevator pitch for the creamery.
We're located in beautiful Tomales, California.
But actually, it is really beautiful. That's actually not a lie.
As it is not a joke, and it's not copy. It's true. It's in the far western part of Marin County, just by the Sonoma County line. And we raise goats and sheep on site. And so we milk those. And then we also buy in some milk from Silva Dairy, which is on the other side of our teeny tiny town. And we're one of the few places that has a creamery there on site. So I can see the goats walking down the hill, getting milked, and then I know it's time to drive my tanker across the driveway, pick up the milk, and bring it over to the vat and start turning it into cheese.
Oh man, what kind of like measurement do you do? You know, you said the milk changes through time, so are you just sort of like sampling the milk every month or 2 months and figuring out, or who knows, even a lot more often than that?
There are some lab tools that we use to check butterfat content and things like that, but as you say, a lot of it is just tasting. And
So you literally are like, this is some fatty milk. Like that's
there's some of that, that's just for fun, but then it's also seeing how it's reacting to our process. So we have a formula that is somewhat set, and then just over time as I've worked there, I've noticed different results because of the milk. Even if we're putting the same inputs in, your result is a little different. So applying a slight tweak to the formula to get it to exactly what you want.
Yeah. So, head cheesemaker, one of the great job titles in the history of the earth, I think.
I don't make head cheese, though.
Yes, yes, right. Head cheese. Yeah. Worst job in the world, actually.
It's
That
kind
one.
of good. It's just not my bag.
What do you do? Like, what's the day to day? You know, you wake up and.
I wake up, I drink my coffee, and then I get in there and start checking emails.
I was about to say, you check emails, just like everyone else.
Exactly. So there's that administrative part where I'm taking orders and coordinating with people and getting all of our cheese moved to where it needs to go. And then we get to the business of making the cheese. So that's going across and picking up milk, pasteurizing it, managing its temperature through that process, and then adding cultures, rennet, and salt eventually once it comes time to give it that flavor block.
That's so interesting. You know, you mentioned earlier that like your main job is to go from milk to curd, but then that next step is that's somebody else, not the head cheesemaker, who does that, or what?
I have delegated that to my delightful assistant, Nick. He's in charge of what's called affinage. Obviously, also we have a member of staff who is like his mentor and our real affineur, Maureen. But they are in charge of the aging of the cheese. So once we have it into wheels for our hard-aged cheese, it goes into a cave. And it's not a real drippy, scary cave. It's a big walk-in fridge with...
Why you gotta ruin it for me? I wanted to imagine a drippy cave, bats.
I would love if we could just bore into a hill and have an actual cave, but that's not in the budget. So for now, we use our walk-in fridges, and they'll stay in there for 3 to 4 months, sometimes up to a year, depending on kind of what we're going for. They have to get washed periodically, just scrubbed with water. Sometimes we will just do a dry brush to manage the mold and the like rind cultures that we're trying to develop on the surface of the cheese.
Oh man, talk to me more about rind cultures, if you can. I'm just like it actually is totally fascinating. Like, how do you make them grow in this way? You're creating like little communities, right? I mean, You're community building on the cheese.
In fact, people often call it your community of cultures and the microbiome of your cheese, as it were. We inoculate with geotrichum and penicillin molds, and those will create like the bloomy rind you see on brie or other soft cheeses like that. And geo is also important for hard cheese rind. We also use something called Micador, which gets brined onto the exterior of our hard cheeses, and it helps create that hard outer layer that protects the inside creamy deliciousness.
How'd you get into this? Were you like chemistry or like biochem major?
Not even close. No, I was a history major in school. I've done a lot of
history of Roquefort, granted, but
sure,
you know,
yeah, in my spare time.
Yeah.
But when the pandemic hit, I was living in San Diego at the time. I was working in wineries, and all our tasting rooms closed, and I really couldn't do that job anymore. And I was like, let's see what else is out there. And I got an apprenticeship at Tuluma Farms, and now I'm the head cheesemaker.
That is awesome. We want to introduce another guest onto the stage. Cecilia Phillips is a broadcast video producer with KQED's Check Please Bay Area and a digital video producer for KQED Food. Welcome, Cecilia. You there? There she is. Cecilia made us a video. They brought cheese. Cecilia brought a video. So why don't you tell us about the video you have?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. I don't know how to make cheese, but I do know how to make videos, so hopefully you enjoy that. I actually went out for Check Please. I do a new segment called Cecilia Tries It, which is part of our flagship food show, Check Please Bay Area. This was an opportunity for us to actually go out into the communities and feature not traditional brick and mortar restaurants and see some different spots where people can find food and go and try some things that they wouldn't necessarily find at a restaurant. So we actually went to Daily Driver, which is the first urban creamery in San Francisco. And at Daily Driver, they produce cheese under 2 different labels. One label is the Daily Driver label, which is the milk from Silva Farms. And the cow's milk there is made into cream cheese and butter. But then they also sell the Tomales Farmstead Creamery cheese, where Jenna is the head cheesemaker. So this video kind of gives an overview of that spot, Daily Driver in the city, and also a sneak peek into our next season, season 17 for Check Please Bay Area.
Oh, that's awesome. There's some great goat footage in this, if you love goats. Let's watch the video, and then we're going to talk with Cecilia a little bit about it.
Daily Driver is this really dynamic maker space, and it's a bagelry, a cheese-making operation, and a roastery all under one roof. Yeah, we are probably one of only a few urban creameries in the entire United States.
Oh, this looks so good. Tell me a little bit about the cow's milk that you use.
It's insanely amazing milk. So we pick up the milk once a week. It's 500 gallons of milk that we drive down over the Golden Gate Bridge, which is kind of a crazy operation, probably why there's not a lot of urban creameries.
You guys got to come and see this. All right, so this is the cow's milk being pumped in.
So we pump it in, then make cream cheese and butter from that. We make a European style or French style butter, which means that cultures are added to it. It's beautiful and it just has this very distinct flavor. We are really hoping that people, when they come in here and see the cheese making happening, that they connect that the source comes from 50 miles away and just right in our backyard. So it's 160 acres. We have 200 goats and 80 sheep. A little bit more right now because we have a bunch of baby lambs. Something that we feel really passionate about is Tomales and West Marin and protecting land out in that area. So if you have healthy pastures and healthy soil, then you have healthy animals. If you have healthy animals and use fresh milk, you just can't go wrong.
This is my calling. I'm a goat farmer and a goat milker, soon to be. All right.
The first thing you do is you grab the claw and then you switch this to open so it'll be in line with the hose. And then you just grab each one and kind of stick it on the teat.
Okay. There we go. So turn on.
Yep, try to open.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is gonna be warm, right?
Yep.
Okay. It's super frothy when it comes straight from the other.
Yep.
This is great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Wild. Cheers. Okay, so all this milk, all these animals, let's talk about some of the cheeses that you make.
Great, I'd love to talk about cheese.
You've also paid homage to the people who had cultivated the land for years in the naming of your cheeses.
Yeah. So the original inhabitants on unceded land on our property are Coast Miwok tribe. Our first cheese that we made is called Kene, which means one in Coast Miwok. And then we have a cheese like our fresh goat cheese is called Liwa, and that means water. It has the most water content.
So this is cheese made from the goat's milk that I actually milked one of the goats up north.
That's right.
And this is the cheese that was made from those goats.
Exactly. So that's our chev, which just means fresh goat cheese. And it's just a couple days out of the mold.
It's really tangy, but it's also incredibly smooth. and really spreadable.
Yeah.
I would use this on my bagel.
Excellent work, Cecilia. Clearly, you've spent a lot of time on farms.
So much time on farms. That was actually my first time on a farm, going up to your farm. I live in Sacramento originally. I was born there, and you go to the state fair and you see like a goat or a cow here and there. So to see actual animals like coming down a hill toward you that are about to be milked was a totally different experience for me. It was amazing.
Yeah. I love that you were sort of like, well, I'm going to wear a flannel because I'm going to a farm. But then I'm going to throw on this, I want them to know I'm like a city girl, so I got my leather jacket on.
It was both, right? So Daily Driver is an urban experience. Tamara, who...
No, you nailed it. I mean...
Yeah, flannel, get that in there. Then the leather jacket, got to stay real with it. And then the idea of having an urban creamery was really important to kind of highlight. I think that, all of these amazing folks here on stage have talked about the importance of the farming and the cheese, but Daily Driver really brings home the fact that urban creameries are not really a thing. It's incredibly difficult to bring down the milk from the farm to actually where folks are purchasing the products. And so Daily Driver brings that home for everybody. And there's the giant window that people can actually observe these processes taking place. And it gets someone to actually see the process of the cheese making right in front of them, which is what I wanted to see. And it really kind of just shows them how it all takes place and gets that educational portion and aspect to it and brings it home.
We have a listener on the live stream who wants you to know that they love your new segment. You're an amazing lady, it says. You need to visit Foodie Land Night Market.
We are going to go there. Cecilia Tries It is an amazing way that we can just go out into the community and find like places where people can find off the beaten path food locations. So I'm absolutely going to go there. And it's another opportunity to just show people places that they can find a ton of different types of food and support local businesses that they wouldn't necessarily see on Check Please Bay Area.
That's awesome. Cecilia, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing the early preview. That's so fun to see. Jenna, what's it like seeing your place on, your products and your colleagues there sort of in the segment?
It's really fun and exciting. Cecilia got to milk a goat with a particularly nicely shaped bag.
Is that what it's called, literally?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
In the parlance, you could call it an udder. I was just noticing that it was like nice and symmetrical. The teats pointed down, good medial ligament. It's just really
I was thinking
a nice
all
one.
that same things. I had the same.
I could tell.
Same train of thought. So now I want to take us a little bit off the beaten cheese trail to Miyoko's Creamery in Petaluma. And, vegan cheese has been around, as we were discussing earlier. How do you think your approach, you've been vegan for 35 years, I understand. How do you think your approach is sort of different from the folks who preceded you in this?
Yeah, well, I really honor history and tradition, and I was a huge cheese aficionado before I became vegan. So my lifelong goal was to figure out how is it done, and can the same techniques be applied to plant milks, and can we turn them into cheese? Cheese is a thing of beauty, of art, of craft, and I don't want to just churn out something that's processed. I want to make something that is a labor of love. And so we have a variety of cheeses that they're all fermented, just like dairy cheese. Right. Many of them, they're coagulated. Some of them are brined, some of them are aged, some of them are fresh. So we have a whole variety of them. And tonight I brought a couple of cheeses that have been aged for almost a year. That's our aging room there, and I'm holding up some large wheels of cheese. And we're constantly experimenting to see what milks work the best, what milks produce certain flavors, what enzymes or bacteria produce certain flavors. And that's really our approach. I think it's inspired a lot of smaller cheesemakers the world over, and I have visited vegan cheesemakers all over the world, in Rome and Hungary and London, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all sort of just exploring the world of plant milks and trying to figure out, what can I do with this?
So one of the things I know about your company is that you just got like a $50 million round of venture capital. And I'm curious, it's pretty amazing. I'm curious, like, what does the R&D process look like for you, given that you have this money to work with and expand and figure out all the enzymes and which seeds have the highest fat content and the other things?
Yeah, well, for the first several years, I was R&D, and I did everything. I mean, it was me, myself, and I. And now we have actual cheesemakers. We have food scientists. We have culinarians, and we work together to figure out what milks can we use, what can we do with it. And it's a matter of trial and error. The cheeses that you'll be trying, the aged cheeses that you'll be trying tonight, were an R&D project we started about a year ago. We had no idea how they were going to turn out. And then we cut into them recently, and it was like, wow, this is pretty good. So now if we're going to launch them, we have to start now. So yeah.
Do you see yourself as part of, in the Bay Area, we know there's sort of all these food technology companies, which are, the Impossibles and the Beyonds. Those eggs that aren't eggs, I can't remember what those are called, but
Just eggs, yeah.
Just eggs,
yeah.
Not egg, but you know what I'm saying. Do you see yourself as part of that movement or not?
So that's called food tech, and to be honest, I think just the opposite. What we're trying to do is I see it as the natural evolution of cheese making, from cow's milk to goat's milk to sheep milks to now plant milk. We're continuing something that started thousands of years ago and evolving it to an exploration of new milks. And I believe, for me anyway, I want to eat organically. I want to eat things that are grown from the ground, that are whole foods. And I'm not interested in going into a lab and making food made in a lab. And that might be right for some people, but for me, as a chef, I want to approach food as a work of art, as something that is born out of craft and beauty and love.
Yeah. I mean, Kate on the live stream asked, what are the different enzymes involved in cheese making and which are okay for vegetarians? Jenna, can we start with you on the sort of enzyme question, and then we'll come to Miyoko, and maybe some of the same ones, or maybe some of them are different.
Sure. So the primary enzymes one is talking about when you're talking about making cheese are going to be broadly called rennet. So traditional rennet comes from the abomastum, which is the fourth stomach of a ruminant. So it could be from a calf, a kid, or a lamb. And so that primarily contains two enzymes. One's called chymosin and one is called pepsin. And those are what help turn the milk into a solid gel that you can then cut and treat as curds and so on. Fantastic scientists of today have found ways to have microbes create those same chemically almost identical chymosin, and that is what is typically used for vegetarian-friendly cheeses. So that's a little bit of a lab-grown deal, but it's a really fascinating science there.
That's so interesting. And Miyoko, how do you think about the chemistry side? Is that a good...
Yeah, so we use a variety of microorganisms, and we are actually working with a culture house to develop proprietary cultures that work specifically for different plant milks. So one that would be for cashews, and that can deliver different flavor and textural profiles. Whether they're, if we're trying to create, let's say, something that's cheddar-like or Gruyere-like, we can actually use certain microorganisms to create those flavors as they interact with the different proteins and lipids in the milk. And through the aging process, the fats and the proteins break down, releasing different fatty acids and protein molecules that deliver those flavors that we're looking for. So we can actually design that, and that's something that we're working on.
Yeah. Vivien, I want to talk to you about a sort of different, maybe it's not even research and development, but just the fact that each different creamery makes its own kind of cheese, which of course sounds like, well, of course. But there are, I think people who buy cheese in the supermarket might be thinking like, there's 10 types of cheese. or 20 types, pick a number. But actually, your cheese trail and some of your work suggests that there's just an
Hundreds. There's so many different ones, and you have to be experimental and adventurous and try new ones. Don't just stick with the same ones. Go try some new things. You'll be completely surprised and excited. So yes.
What are some individual Northern California cheeses that you feel like are really kind of special? Like maybe, I've heard the Creamery up in Point Reyes, Red Hawk, for example. Like, what would make a cheese like that special?
Red Hawk came as actually it was a mistake. They were making a Mount Tam, and they put it in the to be aged along with some other British cheeses, and cheese mites came and crawled onto the Mount Tam, which happens a lot. It's not a big deal. British cheeses sometimes. Anyway, so they didn't want them on this cheese, and so they scrubbed them off with a brine and put them back, and looked a little bit later and found out that the cheese was orange. And they said, oh my gosh, what happened? And it turned out that when you get those stinky cheeses, you actually have to add a culture usually into the milk to make a stinky cheese. But they found out that bacteria, B. linens it's called, was actually in the air in Point Reyes. And when they made the cheese moist, it attracted this bacteria and created this unique cheese that can only be made in Point Reyes.
That's so awesome. Does Northern California, obviously Napa, Sonoma as wine country are well known, and the Bay Area's restaurant scene. Does Northern California get recognized as a cheese region in the world now? Like if you were to go to the cheese regions of France and be like, yeah, I'm from Northern California, are they like, Point Reyes?
I think they have. I think actually Red Hawk was probably the first one to get the Europeans very excited. And yes, and I want to say that Cowgirl was a big pioneer in starting this artisan cheese movement in the Bay Area. They were one of the first, and that's been, I think they came around in '94 or something like that. And so since then, more and more cheesemakers have come online. And the one thing I want to say is that the cheese community is so supportive of each other. So everybody who starts gets the whole community out there to help them. So it's a really nice community.
Yeah. Jenna, is that true? Is that how you felt when you were?
It is, especially having worked in wine previously, where there's a lot of this, not a lot of this, headbutting, not handshaking. It's been really cool and interesting to have the resources of those who have come before to sort of refer to, get in a long email exchange with. It's really nice.
Is there such a thing as terroir, like there is in wine, in cheese?
Absolutely, especially when it comes to a farmstead product, where you're getting milk from just this one herd or this one flock. It's entirely dependent on what the animals are eating and how they're raised, and all these different factors come together to influence the flavor of the milk for sure. And that is reflective of the land, which is what terroir means.
Yeah. You also noted that you have goats and sheep there, but you don't have cows. How different is it to make cheese from the three different animals?
The process is very similar. You might use different cultures, and they shed different amounts of whey, for example. So goat milk tends to be a little more watery, cow is somewhere in the middle, and sheep barely has any at all. It's like the most packed and dense with fat and protein.
But also, don't they only produce milk at certain times of year? Like the actual animals themselves are maybe more difficult to extract the milk from?
Absolutely. Sheep have the shortest lactation period. So when our sheep are in milk, we are work, because you got to make all the cheese you can with the milk while it's there. Yeah. Whereas cows, they have a much longer lactation period, and you can spread it out within your herd to where you have the ability to milk year round.
Are there, maybe this is a weird question, but are there certain cheeses that have been like inspirational for you, where you've like eaten that cheese and you've been like, our sheep can do this, or whatever it is?
I think our sheep can do anything.
I believe in your sheep.
Not necessarily. I think every time I taste a new cheese, it just like adds to the Rolodex of flavors that one might want to go for. But for right now, I'm really focusing on just making our current products the absolute best they can be. So that's just paying really close attention to the aging and the packaging and just all these aspects that keep it at peak deliciousness.
As we get closer to releasing you to actually eating these things that we've been talking about, can you tell us about the cheese that you brought?
Today I've brought for you Talika, our 3-milk cheese. So that's cow, goat, and sheep. It's a bloomy rind, so it'll look like brie, but it's gonna taste like nothing you've ever had before, unless you've had it before.
Well, tell me about the flavor profile. How is it not brie, but it's gonna look like brie?
Brie is ultra mild and kind of reminds me of just like butter and cheese form.
You said that like it was a bad thing.
It's absolutely not a bad thing. It's just not what Talika is. Talika has a little bit more of a bright flavor, a little more tartness, and the paste, so the texture of the curd inside the cheese is a little more like crumbly and spreadable rather than oozy.
I want to open up the house here for questions. We've had some of these online questions, but for anybody here, do we have any brave souls who'd like to just throw up a hand? Oh, I see somebody being talked into it. Who wants to throw up a hand and ask the first question? Oh, we do. Sorry, too late. Yeah, are we going there or here? Sure, let's start here.
Hi, I hope you can hear through the mask. Apologies. I was wondering how environmental changes have impacted the milk and your cheese making process or nut milk making process as well.
And what's your name? Where are you from?
Oh, sorry, Jen Bennett from Castro Valley.
Cool. Thanks, Jen. Do you want to say?
Environmental impact is great, and it really nowadays is coming down to water. So my main goal in the Creamery this year is to decrease our water use and really be as conscientious as possible about how we're using that limited resource. That's the main thrust of it at this point, is just really trying to get a handle on where the water's going and how to make best use of it.
I'll jump right in. The cheeses that you're going to taste tonight are predominantly made out of cashews, and that is one of the least water-intensive crops in the world. They only grow in tropical rainforests, and they're not water. It's actually a wild crop. It just covers vast mountaintops, and the only source of water is rainfall. So there's absolutely no water used.
That's where cashews come from?
Yes.
I feel like I should have known that. Did anybody know that? Yeah.
So they're originally from Brazil, and they only grow in rainforests, and they're not water. They're wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does that mean you have a limited supply, though? I mean, I think of like the almond orchards here and like what's happened as they've become more popular. I mean,
yeah. Well, luckily, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of miles of mountain ranges. I've been to Vietnam. Same thing in Ivory Coast, Brazil, just covered with cashews. I think we're one of the largest users of cashews in North America at this point. And we are trying to diversify, which is why we're moving to legumes, oats, and watermelon seeds, which are also very, very sustainable.
Wow. Do they grow in like similar environment as like coffee would? Is it like that?
You know, I don't know much about coffee growing, so I can't really say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe
but
not.
Probably, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, great. Another question.
Hi. I feel like producers of food have their own kind of personal favorite, like maybe bartenders like Fernet, baristas like Cortados. Is there like a cheesemaker's cheese that cheesemakers tend to like?
Wow.
That maybe
What a great question. What's your name? Where are you from?
I'm Nathan. I'm from the Richmond district.
Cool.
I think a lot of cheesemakers would say the cheese they like best is the one they don't have to make. Simply because, I mean, I love all of our cheeses. I think they're really delicious, and I eat them and I give them to people. But sometimes it's nice not to have to have been right up on it all the way along. A little distance is nice, and it's something you don't expect. Like when somebody else has made it, you don't necessarily know if there's a flaw. You just like, oh, this is interesting, cool. Whereas if you try your own, you're like, oh no, what have I done?
Okay, quick follow-up. How do you feel about shredded cheese in a bag?
I eat it in the fridge in the middle of the night. No, I don't. It's gross.
What about melted, though? No, I won't make you answer that. We have another question over here.
Hi, I'm Minda Guha from the Co-Caring Initiative. And I thought it was really cool how you talked about how the cheese makers are supporting one another. And one of the things that my organization does is really think about how people can support one another. And, you know, I'm curious, as cheesemakers, how you create that culture of sharing and how other industries and other types of people can support your industry.
It is a sort of uniquely organic thing in that I think cheesemakers know how hard it is to start a creamery. So when they see somebody else with the guts to try and go for it, they sort of gather around and say, "You can do it. I believe in you. We need more people out here doing this." So it's really just, I guess it's altruism, which is difficult to rely on, but I'm grateful for it.
Vivien, what do you
I think a lot of the pioneers the pioneers in the artisan cheese world were very kind people. A lot of them were women. There are a lot of women cheesemakers. And I think usually what happens is it comes from the top. So whoever started, if they were nice people, they passed that down to the next generation. And that's what's continued, I think.
Why do you think it was that many of the pioneers were women cheesemakers?
You know, something we can do. We're hardworking. We're exacting. We're kind. We're giving. I don't know. We do a lot of, I don't know why. I'm not sure.
And do you think this culture that we've been talking about is specific to the Bay Area, like Northern California cheesemakers, or you think it's broader?
It's nationwide for sure. Some of my best and most useful cheese contacts are on the other side of the country because they're just people I know and who are ready, willing, and able to talk to me about cheese issues.
Yeah.
What do you need from them? I'm just curious. Like, what do you need from someone in Philadelphia?
Typically, they're in Vermont.
Or Vermont. Sorry, Vermont. You're right. That's the right name check.
Just like, I need to get this cheese to market. Do you think I can wrap it with 75% of the rind on? Or just thoughts on seasonality and things like that. Just sort of open-ended conversations, but that ultimately you reflect on when you're back at the vat doing your work.
Back at the vat.
Hi, my name is Loretta. I'm from Alameda, and you were talking about how the process is the same when it comes to doing cheese for sheep and goat and for dairy. But I was wondering, how do you put your personality? How do we taste the personality of the cheesemaker when it comes to eating your cheese?
Well, I spit in it. No, I'm sorry.
I knew it.
Just kidding. No, I think the way my personality comes through is really when you come into a farm tour. It's not so much in the cheese itself, it's how it's presented and the ability to sort of explain your process along the way and really just having fun with it.
Wait, hold on. We got to follow up on this. You don't think that the kind of cheese you make is like specific to like your creation and like who you are?
It is, in that it wouldn't happen if I wasn't there doing it, but I think that it's possible to pass the torch to someone else and still have a really great product and have it be what you want it to be. It's not like rock star syndrome, you know? You can learn to do it too.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Hi, I was just wondering, like earlier you guys were talking about, or somebody asked about the like support between the cheesemakers and the cheesemaker community. Is there like something more formal, like some sort of like association, like organization of cheesemakers, dairy farmers, whatever in the Bay that's like some
the
larger
Cheesemaking
group
Alliance?
We have there is the California Artisan Cheese Guild, which you can be a cheese enthusiast and be a member. And that's a lot of cheesemakers, small cheesemakers in California. There's also the National American Cheese Society as well.
Wow. Can I ask, just before how many people here have like tried to make cheese in this room?
Wow.
I was like, there's some cheesemakers in here. All right.
Hi, my name's Nick from Dublin. I had a question about the cheese trail. The map's rather wide, and I was wondering if in the Marin County or Sonoma County areas, it's actually possible to hike from cheese tasting room to cheese tasting room.
I don't believe it is.
How far do you want to hike?
I'm so sorry. But
Unless
you
you
might be
walk
able to
very
bicycle.
fast.
Oh. But I would be very careful on Highway 1.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Yeah, tell me about that.
Oh, no, sorry. That was the question. Is it bicyclable?
I think so. And you know, on the cheese trail there are driving tours, which you can also use as bicycle tours that actually give you suggested routes to visit several in a day.
I'm just really curious about watermelon seeds. I mean, I don't know a lot about watermelon seeds, but I just can't imagine that they would actually be fatty enough. They're not like a nut. And it seems like it would take an awful lot of them.
This is a great question. Yes.
No, they're actually really high in fat and really high in protein. Now, the protein is different. The protein that you find in dairy milk is casein, which is a very specific structure and functions in a very different way. Plant proteins tend to be globulins, and while they coagulate, they don't behave exactly the same way. So, you know, we're never going to, if you're going to make cheese out of plant milk, they're never going to behave just like dairy cheese. And the way I look at it is, they can be different. You know, sheep's milk cheese doesn't pretend to be cow's milk cheese, and plant milk cheese can be yet its own thing. And watermelon seeds really lend themselves well to cheese making because they are so high in protein and fat.
That's so, it's just so interesting that as a general practice, people spit out the watermelon seeds.
Yeah.
When you're saying that's where all the good stuff is.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Melissa from Walnut Creek. I have two questions. They kind of lend into each other. Miyoko specifically, I'm really fascinated by the idea of vegan cheese. I'm wondering, though, how much of your creation is cheddar-like, Swiss-like? You know, how much are you trying to fashion your cheeses after cheeses that exist in Dairyland? And how much of it is your own creation? And kind of stemming to that, as far as making cheeses as a whole, how much of your time is spent wanting to create a new type of cheese versus the continuation of a similar cheese that you've made for years?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, you know, my goal was try to replicate. And then I realized, why am I doing that? Why don't I just make something that's completely new, that can still be understood as cheese, but it has its own characteristics, its own flavor. And I think we don't need to replicate exactly what's come before. Let that be its own thing of beauty, and we'll create something new.
How do you feel about that, Jenna?
I think that's the best possible way to put it. I think that there's space for everyone to be making cheese, whether it's vegan or not. I think that's a really astute point. I like it.
But how about just like the idea of how much do you feel like your cheeses have to fit into the pre-existing buckets that people have for cheese?
I would love for them not to have to at all. And so when I describe it to people, I try to describe the characteristics first so they can sort of have an idea of what to expect, and then give them so it's Manchego-like, it's feta-like, as opposed to this is our exact feta recipe. Because I just don't think that's very productive. And we don't need to be knocking off cheeses of Europe. Let's make new, exciting, interesting cheeses of California.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There we are.
So I'm Vietnamese, and I'm very interested in the fact that you mentioned cashew from Vietnam. So have you tried the cashew from Vietnam versus from Brazil? Number one. Number two is that, can I make cheese at home?
Yes, you can make cheese at home. In 2012, I published a book called Artisan Vegan Cheese, and it tells you how to make your own cheese at home. And I thought never would I ever go back into business again, even though I've been a serial entrepreneur for 35 years. And enough people said, I love your book, but you know what? Making cheese is hard, and it takes a long time, and I don't want to do it, so can you just make it for me? And that's really kind of why I started Miyoko's. But yes, cashews from Brazil make a different cheese than cashews from Vietnam. And so it's really interesting. There's subtle differences in flavor, just like milk from winter versus spring. So, whatever the terrain is, the soil, any crop is going to gain its nutrients, its flavor from the region that it's grown in, and that's going to impact the final product.
Thank you, Miyoko.
Hi, I'm Lisa from down the street, and I really love like lemon ricotta cheese and jalapeno cheddar. So adding other flavors, are there any other flavors that like excite you that you want to add into your cheeses?
Yeah. Oh, and Vivien, maybe if you know of any, legendary lemon ricotta type.
Gosh, there's so many. People are always trying, what's something, tomarashi is another one from Point Reyes Farmstead that's got chilies and I don't know what, some seaweed. What else has got in it? I can't remember. So people try different things. I can't think of anything else off the hand. I did want to mention a wonderful place that I love, which is you go down to Harley Farms in Pescadero, and they have goat cheese where they decorate it with petals from their of flowers from their own ranch. So just something kind of fun, but that's not inside the cheese. But,
That is glorious. Thank you so much. I want to remind everybody that the cheese is after the show. And I just want to give our panel here one last final question, which is just your favorite current cheese and why you love it. Jenna.
My current favorite cheese is actually a cheese that I make. Surprise.
I'm so glad you did that. I was going to be like, don't give me...
Plug someone else? No.
Yeah.
We came up with an all sheep's cheese that we call Fortuna because we were lucky enough to get some bonus sheep milk from a friendly farm, and we aged it for a year, and it just turned into this incredible, super rich, nutty, kind of piquant, delightful, crumbly little thing, and I'm very obsessed with it, and I would like to make a lot more.
Awesome. Vivien Straus, I know you're going to try and say there's so many good cheeses. Pick one.
No, I will say that I did have a moment where Talico was my favorite, I have to say. I switch all the time, but right now I really love Estera Gold Reserve from Valley Forge cheese, which I think is a really great hard cheese. It's got a lot of flavor. Jersey milk cheese.
That's great. Miyoko.
Well, actually, today I got to taste this amazing vegan cheese from a French cheesemaker who brought it all the way from France and found me at Expo West, and he had made this lovely brie out of soy and cashews. It was phenomenal, probably the best I've ever tasted. But I can't get it very often. So right now, among the cheeses that we make, we have it here today. It's this 8-month-old aged smoked cheese that's sort of like, I don't know, reminiscent of smoked provolone, but it's really, really robust, and I love that.
Very last thing, Vivien and Jenna, tasting notes for the stuff that you brought, just so people know what they're kind of looking out for in the flavors.
Let's say tangy, bright, little bit of mushroominess, but not as much as you'd find in like a camembert or something.
Right.
I know nothing about these terms, I just have to tell you. I don't get them. But I've got Mount Tam from Cowgirl out there, which is creamy, delicious, very sweet. You'll love it. And I've got Mattis St. George out there, which is a small farm in Santa Rosa. You can drive up there. It's like going to Europe, and it's a hard cheese. And then I've got Foggy Morning from Nicasio Valley, which is a fresh cheese made from Farmstead organic cow.
We have a variety of cheeses out there, both fresh and aged. So please go out there and check it out. We also have our butter, our cultured vegan butter.
That's great. Want to just say thank you to Miyoko Schinner, founder of Miyoko's Creamery. Thank you to Vivien Straus, founder and managing partner of the California Cheese Trail. And of course, thank you to Jenna Coughlin, head cheesemaker, Tomales Farmstead Company. I'm Alexis Madrigal. I've been your host of this Forum Live, and I will join you in the cheese tasting. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. That was fun. Should we wear our masks?